right, may I have your attention, please? We are going to begin in about 2 minutes. May I request all of you to have a seat. You want to use the other one? The other one is
Okay, we're going to start in 1 minute from now, but in a good conference we have also advertising, right? So just for the people who are already here, if you are feeling cold, we have some clothes for sale. Yes. Yes. I didn't anticipate we should have done hoodies, but actually t-shirt, but next time we produce hoodies. So these t-shirts, we have about 50 t-shirts in different sizes, and from 2XL to small. These are two quotes futurists usually like. Actually, one was a suggestion by Dr. Ivana. It can be, if it can be imagined, it can be created. Elise Boulding, for people who want to follow up on that, Elise Boulding famous quote. Or if you rather want to carry a t-shirt saying, if you want to know the future, you have to create it. We made these two t-shirts in support for some people who have to self-fund to come here, but are not so financially, what you ever say, I mean, they would appreciate to get a little bit support. So that's why the t-shirt costs not the 10 ringgit or something, but 100 ringgit. This is approximately 20 US. So if anybody wants to support the APFN Secretariat in supporting some of the people coming here, you can do it by buying clothes. Unfortunately, it's not winter clothes. So, but next time we anticipate the future better. Okay? Thank you very much. They are for sale outside. You can just give them cash or whatever. Yeah, thank you. So with this break, you can...
Thank you, Jost. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Asia Pacific Futures Network Conference for our thematic session number 2, titled Civilizations, Technologies, and the Futures of Societies. We are privileged to begin this session with a keynote presentation. Our esteemed speaker, Mr. Riel Miller, is a senior fellow at École de Pont Business School in Paris, as well as affiliated with the University of New Brunswick in Canada and the University of Stavanger in Norway. Mr. Miller will be sharing insights on how to be a guerrilla futurist in a world of planetary disruptions and institutional resistance. Very interesting topic. All right, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Riel Miller.
One, two, 1, 2. You can hear me? Great. My first test, obviously, is going to be whether or not the PowerPoint works. That'll be a big test, because if it doesn't work, then I'm in trouble. There we go. That's the first bit. Then it's going to be the microphone. Okay. Anyhow, thank you very much. It's really a wonderful honor and a privilege to be here. I feel very humbled. I'm an old white Canadian, educated in the North, and have lived the privileged life of an international bureaucrat And so it's really with a great awareness of where I stand and where I'm from that I'm here to talk to you and share what I can, but in a spirit, I hope, of finding ways to appreciate what I've learned over the years. So I hope I've learned some things that might be useful and interesting, but I realize that it's quite difficult to connect things up. I just finished the book by Jim Dater about weirding humanity. And it's again a fascinating perspective from a very specific, he's very conscious about where he's starting from and why he's saying what he's saying. And it just keeps on reminding me all the time of how important it is for us to understand that the way we see things reflects who we are and where we are and when we're alive. And that a crucial part of being able to think about the future is to situate ourselves. And that's an ongoing process. It does not end. It's continuous. So what do I mean? Aha, so I'm not passing the first test. Oh, maybe I have to turn it on. Helps to turn it on. Yeah. Okay. I want to start here. We've been doing this for a long time. We've been building monuments. We've been building, closer? Yeah. We've been building structures which pay tribute to the past in a way that imposes it on the future. Look familiar? You build a structure and you want it to be powerful in the future. So you're taking your past success, because you're a pharaoh, you're a powerful man, and you want to create something that will impose itself on the future. You can do that also in Latin America, at Chichen Itza or Palenque. So it's not like it's just Egypt, but it's also in Latin America. And then, of course, you can also build a great wall. And I was recently in the Imperial City, in Beijing. You feel small, small, compared to the grandeur, the power of past generations. But you also feel, I think, respect, awe at the engineer, at the planner, at the bureaucrat, at the organizer, who is able to create such wonders of the world. We spend a lot of time colonizing the future, thinking about revolution, building an atomic bomb, going to the moon. There's still a lot of people who are very admiring of the idea of moonshots. And many of the stories that we tell are about those heroes, mostly, some heroines, but mostly heroes, who managed somehow to know what they were doing, to make it happen, and to create the future. But I think in this room we know that those stories are illusory. They had no idea what they were doing. They had no idea. And many people tried. They just weren't the winners, so we never told their story. This idea that somehow the prescient, the person who has the vision, created the future, is fundamentally, profoundly false. Doesn't mean that it's not powerful. It doesn't mean that it's not seductive. It doesn't mean that it doesn't capture our imaginations, and I'm speaking now of the people who are, I think, in this room, that we all have a connection to the university of the 21st century, a way of thinking about these things. So I encounter, and I think everybody here encounters, this problem continuously. We're afraid of certain things. We're afraid of the climate changing. We're afraid of the next pandemic. We're afraid of the next election. We're afraid of the next war. We're afraid of what our children will do. Well, will they have a job? We're afraid of the future. And that's a big monster. But there's a problem. The earth is not flat. And the policymaker, today's strategic planner, an expert in foreseeing the future in different ways, are being asked to plan to avoid falling off the edge. Can you be really clever so that you won't fall off the edge? Now, you're the engineer. You should calculate that. I don't want to fall off the edge. I'm afraid of falling off the edge. But if the earth is not flat, you're not going to fall off the edge. It just doesn't happen. There's no point in making that kind of estimation. And this is the fundamental reality, I believe, of our world. We do not live in a world that is more or less complex. It is complex. It is creative. We are the fruit of that creativity. Astounding, this universe that we live in and the things that it does in its creativity. Unknowable in advance. Even if you knew where every atomic particle was, even if you had the perfect model and the perfect data and the perfect generative artificial, dare I use the word, intelligence, you cannot know the future. The future is unknowable because the future is creative. The conditions of the future that create the future when it happens, the present, are unknowable. They cannot be calculated in any way. That's the meaning of a creative, complex, emergent universe. So are we going to insist that the world is flat for most of the time? Well, yeah, maybe sometimes I'll think about it differently. Or are we going to find a different way of relating to the world around us? The conflict between human agency, our ability to act, and the universe that we happen to live in is quite dramatic, this conflict. Quite disturbing, disruptive, the source of mental disorder, anxiety, stress. But you promised me that you would control the future. You said that you would make X great again. But it's not. It's not. I'm so disappointed. I'm so disappointed. You are the big expert. We pay millions and millions. You have computers. Intelligent computers. What's an intelligent computer? And yet, you disappoint me. I can't sleep at night because you can't control the future. You cannot colonize tomorrow with your great ideas. So human agency versus complexity, what I call futures illiteracy, generates a fear of uncertainty, a bias to seeking path dependency. That's building pyramids. If I want to be sure of something, well, good to put it in concrete. Concrete, it'll be there for a long time, you know. Build something that'll last. If you're the bureaucrat promising the pharaoh something that will be a big symbol in the future, build a statue, big statue, a pyramid, that'll last for 5,000 years, 10,000 years. Then you're right. But what are you right about? You're right about the existence of the pyramid, but you're not right about the meaning. You're not right about the experience. You're not right about the moment of life that lives in the present as being. You're not right about that because you can't know it. And you have no understanding necessarily of the meaning of that pyramid for the people who are there. But we're nevertheless biased towards this path dependency because you want to be right. There's a fetishism of immortality. Lasting forever. Nation states must last forever. Empires must last forever. People should live forever. Regardless of whether that's feasible or not, and I think it's not feasible, in this universe where birth and death are fundamental to its creativity, can we stop that? Should we stop that? It would have been better to save the dinosaurs. Better for the dinosaurs, of course. It's better to save humans as they are today, as industrial creators of waste, than to let them die. Maybe not for what comes after. Of course we want to preserve ourselves. But does preservation really mean stasis? Does it mean continuity? Or do we embrace difference? Birth and death. Preoccupation with endogenous continuous improvement and reform. This is, you want to replace your organs so you can live forever. I'm going to replace all the parts of me so that I can live forever. This is reform. Stay in the same shape, stay in the same. Is that generous to my children that I should stay forever? There are many ideas in my head that I think should die. They should die with me. Their fears, attitudes. I accept them. I don't necessarily even embrace them, but they're in my head. I'm a child of the 20th century. The 20th century was a very awful place. Remembering and forgetting, that involves, again, birth and death. We have a strange, you encounter this as a futurist all the time. People say, let's think about 20 years from now, because then I can be a little bit more creative, a little bit more open to imagine. I need your permission. I need the permission to be wrong. In other words, when I think about the future, what I want to do is be right. I want to know which lottery ticket will win the lottery. I want to know which horse will win. I want to know which career will win. I want to know which spouse will win. And I can't tell you that if it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in the future. But then I say to people, remember what happened wasn't it a little while ago? We were all going to the office and everybody, and then from one day to the next, it all changed. Boom. Just like that. That's a complex emergent universe. We know this from complexity theory. We know this from chaos theory. We know about tipping points. We know about convergence. And we know about surprise. And yet, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. No wonder we're not balanced. No wonder we're off on one side. So futures illiteracy, this is really unbelievably, it's not just, it is trigger hair. What is futures literacy? So I'll go very quickly. No. Just, can you turn it off? Put this away. So futures literacy, as you all know, you can just turn it off. Forget it. I'm not going to play. I'm not going to play. Futures literacy, as I think most of you know, is a capacity, a capability. Can you do it one at a time? Can you do it one at a time? Okay, so go one more. Okay. Futures literacy, and I'll tell you, I'll just say go, okay? Futures literacy is the ability to use the future for different reasons, in different ways, in different contexts. Maybe in part that sounds fairly simple. But the different reasons is quite complicated. Think about it for a moment. How many different reasons do you have for thinking about the future? Well, the reason I'm thinking about the future right now is because I want to avoid a car that's going to hit me, right? So a car is coming across, and I don't want to get hit by a car. I'm thinking about how to survive, and I'm thinking about a goal. My goal is to get to the other side of the street. Most of what we do with the future, because this is what we do as children to survive, is use the future as a goal or as some form of preparation for something specific, something we know. If I tell you to prepare for blah, 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 you'll say, what? I can't prepare for that because I don't know what it is. Yeah, exactly. So most of the time what we have from childhood is the survival, causal, teleological way of using the future. And then instead of learning how to use the future in different ways when we're adolescents and we encounter ambiguity, emergence, and uncertainty, we learn that the teacher knows the answer. Oh, thank goodness. So I can still believe in Papa. Daddy's still taking care of me. Patriarchy's still good because it's going to keep everything under control. No, no, no. We use the future in more ways than that. So there are more reasons for using the future. Please. There's the crystal ball, which is very important. Very important. The future, from an astrologer's or divination perspective, it can be incredibly orthogonal. It can be incredibly disturbing. What's the point? It's not to know the future. It's to disturb your perception of the present, right? My horoscope says I'm going to get rich today. So all of a sudden, I'm looking around. I'm looking around, and I'm saying, yeah, oh, and there's, $100, who knows? But it wasn't because it was fate. It was because it changed what I did in the present. It changed what I was paying attention to. That's the power of the future. The future changes what we pay attention to. It transforms our perception of the present. And it changes the way we see the world unfolding around us. That's not related to some specific future. That's related to disturbing your vision. Next, please. So this is the classic. This is the Bishop Hines version, but there's quite a few of them. This is the cone. This is the past into the future. Very familiar. Yeah, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop. But I'm arguing for a much more diversified way of thinking about the future. So that's next. Next. That's it. So the idea here is that we use the future in many ways for different purposes with different methods. And the methods are actually different, so there's epistemic difference. Next, please. I will go really quickly through this. So the idea of understanding these different ways, this is a cyclotron. Next. Next and next. The idea here is to make invisible things visible. And if we're going to have a strong theory of the future, which at the moment we probably, I think, would all agree we don't particularly have, then we're going to have to find a basis for understanding the future in many different ways. That's what the theory needs to be about. And this is where I think that it's useful to think, next please, of exploring different ways of thinking about the future. Next. This is just an example of looking at different ways of thinking about the future. And it's just an example to show how a group of students in a virtual process can discover different ways of thinking about the future for themselves. In other words, this is not something you can tell people. This is something people will discover on their own if you create the structured learning process in order to come to terms with it. Structured learning processes can expose people's anticipatory systems. Anybody and everybody can become aware that they use the future for different reasons, in different ways, in different contexts. Everybody can become aware of that because we all do it. We need to create the conditions in which it becomes evident. It moves from tacit to explicit. And we can conduct research into it in ways which make it more intelligible for all of us. Next, please. So just very quickly, I see this as a new turn in future studies. A pluriepistemic from the outset, it's already come up. The human imagination cannot be known in only one way. We use our imagination of necessity for different reasons, okay? So the subject of future studies is inherently pluriepistemic. You cannot just know it through numbers. You cannot just know it through forecasting. You cannot just know it through divination. You need to understand that it's something, our imagination, which is full of emotion, affect, symbols, continuous imagery. It is a multi-dimensional phenomenon. A pluriepistemic subject demands a multi-ontological, Anissa and I were saying this before, multi-ontological framework, hence the discipline of anticipation as the theory and practice of conscious human anticipatory systems and processes. ASP can take many forms. Naturally, it's pluriepistemic, it's multi-ontology, and therefore it needs many different ways of studying. Next, please. You all know, I think, that there are a number of UNESCO chairs that have been established as part of creating this new discipline of anticipation, of kind of, in some ways, redirecting, refounding future studies in a way which I think will potentially address some of its weaknesses, hopefully. Next. I'm going to end with walking on two legs. Subverting the monoculture of certainty by democratizing futures literacy. This image is from a dual paradigm slogan from Mao Zedong about peasants and workers who have two different paradigms working together. Anticipation for the future, next. Anticipation for emergence, distinguish and balance. Now you can go repetition and difference, continuity and ephemerality, planning and improvisation, perception and choice, knowing and not knowing, doing and not doing, legacy and spontaneity, generality and specificity. These are the things we need to balance. To me, that's the Tao. The Tao of the future is balancing all of these things. And one of the key points, and it's a very difficult and frightening one for me, is that it means that we can move beyond the characteristic planner's rationale. The planner's rationale is the end, the goal of my plan, justifies the means. Now, you can tinker it, you can be ethical, less ethical, better or worse, you can be more conscious, socially conscious, but in the end, profit or something else, the war, the monument, those justify what I'm going to do. Keeping the climate the way it's supposed to be, that'll justify putting everybody under my thumb. This is a very dangerous argument, yeah, that the ends justify the means. Last slide. You just go through. This is something that people can see, it's available. This is where futures literacy allows us to do innovation and agility, discovery and confidence, choice and capability, keep going, leadership and knowing, strategy and resilience. Last slide. This is the last slide. This is the slide about the futurists. Many, many people think that being a futurist is what this is about. It's about how do you get from A to B. I'm on one side, I want to get to the other side, I need the leader, the great leader. Isn't it such a disappointment that there are no more great leaders? We're so sad. Why isn't the great leader here to take us? Do you want to do this? I don't think you want to do that. Next. Back one. Back one there. How we anticipate matters, it changes the present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving on to a moderated panel session titled Societies Shaping Technologies, Technologies Shaping Civilizations. Before we begin, I would like to call Professor Dr. Zainal Abidin Sanusi, Mr. Rushdie Rahim, and Miss Emily Sharp, and Ms. Ora On Pocharon on the stage.
Can I get Rushdie, where are you? You can choose, you want to go for A, P, F, or N. Ora.
All right, we'll continue, and specifically, if we can, to digest what Rial has shared with us, which is quite a lot, and can be a bit need of digestions in terms of understanding what it is about, especially for those who are not that familiar yet. All right, for that purpose, we've got three experts who has been in session on this futures thinking, future literacy, whatever you want to call it, for many years. We agreed in our behind conversations that we take this as a conversations, trying to make use of their expertise. Yeah? But we do have guideline questions, Emily, Rushdie, and Aura. We do have a guideline question that if you look at the theme, can I get the main screen just to put our picture? Yeah, all right. Societies shaping technologies, technologies shaping societies. So to start with, I guess I would like to have your take on this topic before we deep dive deeper on what actually the issues inside it from futures thinking. Yeah. So, Emily, you come from a very diverse background. I mean, especially looking at the community work on the ground. So you can share some insights as much as possible. Try to reflect what Rial is sharing with us. Which one do you think? Is it the first one or the second one? First means that society shaping the technologies, or technologies shaping the societies? Can you start with that? Or yeah, please.
Thank you. I think the fact that none of us have any PowerPoint today hopefully speaks to a little bit about potentially how we're going to have this conversation. And I think that in true Pacific style, there is an interconnection between these two statements. And in fact, one does not lead the other, and one does not exist without the other. And perhaps I'll start with a little bit of a story. So the Pacific region is home to 22 Pacific Island countries and territories. We're 98% ocean, which is 20% of the Earth's surface, but not a huge amount of the global population. But we are an interconnection of peoples, of languages, of ways of knowing and ways of being. And for many generations, futures thinking has shaped the way that people have lived, have grown, have nurtured, have interbeen with their natural environments, and have shaped, of course, their societies. So to answer the question, I think there is no one answer.
Just to take on a bit, yeah? We know that Fiji is facing the climate change issues quite. So if you to apply that in that context, how much of that future thinking is really getting into society and influence their way of thinking, I mean, influence the society live in?
And what a great example, because yes, the Pacific is at the forefront of the climate challenges, and yet we are really not the contributors to the climate crisis. So if we think about societies and technology, which was part of the exploration, I think that the Pacific is living the effects of the technologies that we've all come to enjoy. I flew on a plane to come here. I am contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, and at the same time we have nations, states and territories within our region who are facing existential threat, but who are also using their foresight, their futures and technology to ensure a future that might look very different than it does today. So for example, Tuvalu, and for anyone who's listened in before, we've had Minister Kofe speak of the digital twin in the metaverse. So for a nation state who under very severe scenario will be underwater, they are securing their future in two quite amazing ways. One is in terms of legislation, so that even if the land mass doesn't exist, the identity, the culture, the people still do in terms of international law. But the other is that language, culture, monuments, lands are all kept in the metaverse as a twin. So whether you are displaced and you live somewhere else, you still have continuing connection and you still are able to envision multiple futures even without your landmass.
Thank you, Emily. If I can move on to Rushdie, who's been doing a lot on the industries and the government. Yeah, if you can share with us your thought first, Rushdie, and on these questions.
Yeah, I think I come from an organization where the name is Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology. So we're always looking at technology. However, I dare say we never start with technology due to the fact that to read a quote from my first founding chairman, you know, we're talking about anticipate and identify emerging problems and the technological solutions to solve them. So technology is not the start, but it is, we're trying to solve societal problems. We're trying to solve societal problems, civilization problems, and finding how technology could meet, could address, provide solutions. So although our name is MITE, HT stands for high technology, the high technology is a means. The technology is a means to solve them. So definitely that is a start. However, I'm not saying that, you know, technology does not have the ability to shape civilization due to the fact that we've seen history is littered with such examples. The internet, it started with the printing press, gunpowder, and now you're talking about internet, AI, for example. But how do you use them? And therefore, the sense of futures literacy or the use of foresight and futures thinking is that trying to anticipate what would be issues coming from, you know, the usage of technology. You know, for example, when we're developing, when there was an attempt to actually develop the AI roadmap for the country, we talk about, you know, responsible development and application of AI rather than just the technology itself. So it's a two-edged sword. However, you know, by having this futures literacy, you'll be anticipating the issues as well. In Science and Technology, Science STS Forum in Japan, they talk about the light and shadows of technology. So anticipating the light and shadows of technology, I think is critical in terms of trying to make sense of what we're discussing today. Yep.
Aura, I'm sure a big portions of this will be very much dependent on how the policy shapes the whole thing in the country. So if you can somehow, a bit of like from the policy perspective on the same topic, given your background, I mean, given your areas of expertise in that, from policy perspective, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So in terms of, in the past, perhaps, societies naturally created different technologies, but that was in the past, many, I would say, 1,000 years ago. But afterwards, I think right now what's happening is technologies owned or dictated by certain pockets of the society is actually reshaping society. So that's the problem for me. And public policy with the futures mindset and futures literacy can help open up that black box of policy making, of having us question the assumptions behind policies, question the why. Why would we want to support certain technologies, for example, and question then the plausible scenarios of what would happen when this technology is being used or not used, for example. So I really think futures tools helps to open up the policy discussion and to break up the monopoly of ownership of the direction of usage of society, usage of technology that dictates our society without us even knowing it. And climate change is a very clear example. We're in this mess because the decision to use or not use technology is not democratized. So that's how I would put all this together.
Right, thank you. If you can come back to Emily, I mean, now we got another 15 minutes, actually. So we just want to go to actual case on the ground so that we can have more evidence and showcase how it happened. You were saying just now that the futures thinking, futures literacy is helping a lot in shaping the societies on the ground. Is there any stories or is there any case on the ground that you can share with us that really illustrate that so that we can really understand how is that FL can really be shared on the ground so that it can change the society, or can shape the society?
So I'm going to speak very humbly from practice. I'm not an academic, so what I share is what we learn in real time. And I think our most important lesson is to lead with values. Values-led foresight and futures ensures we're stopping to say whose voice is here or whose voice is not in the room, who is able to participate, to co-create, to anticipate, and for whom are we doing an injustice because they're not on the journey. So for us, I think being able to start with values of unity, of generosity, of love, of not leaving anyone behind is a way for us to be true to the Pacific, and I think be true to a more equitable, inclusive, just future for all. The way that we do that is really by democratizing futures. It's by sometimes not using futures language at all. It's about using terms, metaphors, images that make sense to the people that you really want to be working with. And sometimes you have to do that halfway through a sentence or halfway through a workshop. You really need to meet people where they're at. And I think if we really need to be creating a sense of co-ownership so that foresight and futures as a practice, as a thinking, as a literacy is transformative, then we need to be inclusive in our practice and we need to lead with our values. One example that's not from myself, but one of our colleagues who has spoken in the past around working with youth in communities in Fiji wanted to talk about sending a postcard from the future. And the youth she was with, like, what's a postcard? And on her feet, she had to work, okay, this language is not working. We know where we want to get to, but I have to change my practice. I need to meet these people where they're at. And I think that the other is that even when you're in a co-design participatory conversation, every point matters. And for us, sometimes they were the statisticians. They were the forecasters, they were the modelers who came with a certain future. But that was an important one to listen to. It was a future, it was a voice that needed to be included, as well as others who were more creative, who could think about the plausible, who could think about the transform, who could think about BAU, who could think about, the dystopian, and then of course the forecast and the model, because without them, we can't get to our preferred futures. We need to have everybody on the journey.
I would continue the same, Rushdie. If there are people outside there, when we talk about future, it's always about technology. So they thought it's technology, but it's not always the case. It's not actually the case. I mean, there are more to that. If you can share an experience whereby we managed to convince and turn the perceptions of people into like looking at future studies, just talking about technologies to something beyond that, like what Emily is saying, is values, is those kind of, in the case of Malaysia. Because so far, if we talk about future studies or future in Malaysia, it's all about the technology that we have, the real and all those kind, not the societal part, not the civilizational part?
Well, unfortunately, my scope is very much limited. However, in 2012, the science advisor then, Prof. Zakri, decided to create this so-called Malaysian Foresight Institute, which he says, the methods, tools, approaches are good, but the conversations need to work beyond technology. Hence, Malaysian Foresight Institute was able to look at future of youth, future of consumerism, whereby it's not the natural forte or natural focus areas of mine. So my foresight has been talking about, I think, given to you in your bag is future of sports, for example, where we're helping the Ministry of Youth to actually look at it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it all come back to some sort of technology solutions and applications. Now, creating narratives is one of the things that we in my foresight focus on, due to the fact that different narrative works for different stakeholders. The unfortunate thing, we have this what we call a power interest grid. People with power have no interest. People with interest have no power. So the idea is to create the narrative that you get both people with power and people with interest to be on the same page, and create enough conversations, create enough traction in the work that policymakers would be interested in carrying it forward. Because, as I said, the work involves, bottom up or top down. Top down is easy, whereby the political masters are interested in certain issues and they tell you, please take a look at this. But there's also a lot of work that we've done whereby it's bottom up, where conversations through horizon scanning, this unstructured information creates this so-called momentum, and it's not coming from technology, it's coming from societal needs. For example, the sexy thing now to talk about smart city is talking about ICT and things like that, but we talk about how do you make the city livable, and perhaps then technology will come to solve some of these issues within living in a city. So that is the challenges, but it keeps us at mind, thriving and active, making our work matters.
Thank you. I hope that will illustrate some ideas of how we go about in changing the narrative or creating the narrative. Can go further before we open up to questions and answers. If you have 5 minutes for that, just Aura, given, I'm sure you've involved in many training, capacity building in policy approaches. What would be the best lesson in terms of, like, if you want to share that with those coming from ministries here? You want to bring in this FLL and translate it into policy making process. What would be a success factor for that?
Okay, you ask a tough question. I wanted to link to Real's presentation on complexity, the flock of birds, where it's nonlinear, emergent. You don't expect that you can find the patterns very easily, but maybe there are some basic explanation for behavior. I think for our work in training or working with public officials, policymakers, it's that idea of complexity thinking plus futures thinking, and then we bring it down to the individual too, so the design thinking goes in. And so the blend of all this sort of lens of thinking into the policy analysis world could be very mind-boggling for people who've come out of regression models, looking at statistics or basic cost-benefit analyses and trying to help their organizations decide, right? Should we build a dam or not? Or should we have the pension fund increase at how much percentage? And so on and so forth. So policymakers need usually short-term definite answers to make decisions, but they know full well when we talk about complexity and futures and anticipatory scenarios that I think that's the biggest challenge, because we can't expect policymakers to be geniuses, superhumans, to be able to grasp everything and make such decision. So we've been working more, moving from the realm of bounded rationality of looking at only logic to what we're calling holistic rationality, which is logic plus emotions, just that. We don't make it any more complex than that. So what does the numbers tell you? How do you feel? How do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about if this was your grandmother who got this benefit, or this was your daughter in the future? Like, how would you feel? So bringing in the emotions, the feelings, being authentic to oneself, we think as a school of public policy is one concrete step forward to being this more authentic and being able to be resilient in all these uncertainties that we're bombarded with. So I don't know if that is useful or not. But to put it all together, I think that's the challenge, and I would love to work with other people who are putting all these tools together that would make most sense for policymakers.
Thank you, Aura, because I'm sure there is a number of policymakers who we invited who has been exposed to a number of future studies experts, but when it comes to application, that's the challenge. And your experience, I mean, the tips that you give is something important. So we've got another 5 minutes. Sorry that we're quite strict. Yes, Professor. Okay.
Yes, Tan Sri.
Being Malaysian, you mentioned the last two words is HT, high tech, right? What if you change that high tech to high touch? Because I think we have enough technology. We have enough technology. What we don't have, we do have not enough distribution. So we keep on inventing this technology, the distribution gets more skewed, the discrimination gets even larger. And if you were to talk about this peaceful, balanced harmony that we talked about, we will never arrive at it. I mean, there is a statement by Bill Gates that says if you talk about no one left behind, technology will not work. There will be people, not only one, thousands and millions will be left behind when it's about technology. So this cliche, no one left behind, is just good for the ears. It will not work. So I think there will be a time when we need to stop, say, enough of technology, let's talk about high touch now. Go back to the human part, the spiritual dimension. It's okay that everybody live with 4Gs. Let's have everybody have 4Gs, rather than 6 people have 6Gs and everybody has only 1G. So I think it's time for us to change that. And this is what Mill was saying. Where do we stop and where do we start again? They cannot be continuous. I think if technology were to go the way it is, to me, it's going to be cancerous. In other words, you go on faster and faster and faster, keep on developing, multiplying. The only thing I can think of is the cancer cells. And we are grooming the cancer cells in a different way, and all of us will be eaten up at the end of the day by this technology. It happens, from my point of view, technology starts with the first industrial revolution. If nobody has invented the steam engine, we will have no pollution now, the way it is. But somebody start with a steam engine and go on rolling. We never ever understand the whole idea of what technology is all about. Ask yourself, do you understand what technology is? Ask your kid, do they understand what technology is? They're playing with this 24 hours, but do they understand what it is? So I think it's time to move from the high tech to high touch. Be back the human society that we want, that we've been talking about, and bring the spirituality that Aura was talking about today. And I think probably we'll make another quote-unquote future. I mean, it's a Malaysian problem, but I think we can share it with everyone. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm not sure how to respond to that. Tan Sri was actually a former chairman of mine. So, in terms of name changing, as I said, we're gazetted by the government, so I'm not sure how to approach that. But let's talk about high tech. Now, at MITE, we don't follow high tech definition as in the OECD definition, because due to the fact we understand that high tech is relative. It could be the technology, the definition of high tech OECD, talking about electronics, aerospace, kind of thing. But we talk about high tech in terms of relative. What could be high tech, what could be low tech in aerospace could be high tech in the agriculture side. But what we're trying to do at MITE for the last, I think for the last 8 years, for example, we were trying to make the technology more accessible, Tan Sri. For example, during the last 8 years, what happened in Malaysia's rice field, normally the paddy farmers will post-harvest, they'll burn the rice straws. So what we did was actually we made technology accessible to a particular company that actually convert the rice straws into biodegradable packaging. So previously farmers burn these rice straws, but what they do now is actually they get an extra income whereby they sell these rice straws to these companies, and these companies actually build biopackaging material for, you know, Starbucks cup holders, your hard disk packaging, mobile phone packaging. So this is something that we did for the last 8 years in the northern state of Peninsula, and we're trying to expand this beyond. So there is an attempt, Tan Sri, to move to make this so-called technology more accessible. It cuts across so that, you know, people, you know, can get income and, you know, creating the circular economy. I agree with you with regards to, you know, it's going to be always a catch-up game with regards to technology, because, you know, but I can only relate to you with regards to what we're doing at MITE. And at MITE, due to the fact that we're last 8 years, we invested in this particular company, technology, and we've seen, you know, and you don't have conversation with, we're just saying to them, you know, rather than burn it, roll it, build it, and, you know, and this company buy it from them. So an extra income for them with regards to that. So conversation about technology is not there. But what's driving that initiative was actually the technology to convert that rice straws into biodegradable packaging. That's what we did. Yeah.
Thank you, Rushdie. Ora, would you like to respond? Or?
Thank you for your point. I think it's a challenge for not just Malaysia, but everywhere, where technology is kind of dragging us, right? Dragging us, and we don't even know why we're using some technologies, and we don't even have time to stop. Let's just say our phone, right? To just one month without our phone and see how it would be.
Not 1 month, even 1 day without it.
Or 1 minute. To truly reflect that idea of high touch, you know, of, is this technology making me to become a better human being, for example? Like, we don't truly ask such questions. And again, technology, I think we've been using it to become more efficient, to try to generate something better. But at the same time, I think if we use truly futures literacy, we might find out some of the unwanted consequences of technology earlier than allowing it to drag us this far, for instance. So I'd be very interested in following up on AI technology, for example, and doing really extensive scenario plannings, or looking at all the signals and the potential both disruption, good and bad, for whom, how long it will take, and just to have that collective analysis. To me, that's policy analysis. And I think if we add in our actual goal, which is to have higher spiritual health, to be aligned with the environment, then we can do this analysis in a very meaningful way and have very practical outcomes that we can take action on. So that would be my addition to this conversation. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the last words from Emily. We know that, I mean, at least my assumption is that in the Pacific, the technologies is not as advanced in Japan, for example. Yeah? But I'm sure they may be happier there. So if you can see how you can connect with that kind of thing with technology and the society on the same question that Tan Sri posed just now.
So we are 76 years old, I think, 76, 77, as an organisation. And when we were running some participatory conversations with fisheries scientists, agricultural scientists, statisticians, human rights activists, one of the most common resounding elements in their preferred futures was around Indigenous knowledge. It wasn't technology. People weren't asking for technology in their preferred future. They were asking to incorporate ways of knowing and being that have been shelved for technology and for higher order modern science. So I think we need to really be thinking about decolonizing our thinking around what is propelling us, what do we want to take with us, what is really shaping our decisions for preferred futures. And even with AI, whose voice is not in the data that is shaping artificial intelligence? And what does that mean for the decisions that we're making based on that information? Are there many women? Are there people of diversity? And I think they're the questions that, it doesn't mean we don't use technologies. It doesn't mean that we don't use, AI simulations for policy. I think we need to constantly be asking ourselves, who is in the room, whose voice is included, whose knowledge framework, whose way of knowing and being is shaping our futures and the decisions that we're making.
All right, there's no way I can summarize the thing. Just join me in giving a round of applause to Emily, Rushdie, and Nora. Thank you very much to all the panelists here.
Thank you, Professor Zainal and all panelists for an insightful discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now transitioning into our 1-hour concurrent sessions, each offering unique opportunities for exploration and learning. Please take note of your assigned session. Yeah? The first one, Academic Track 1, Latest Development and Research, is located at Berlian, Level 2. Workshop Track number 2, Images of Our Future, located at Cempaka, Level 1. Workshop Track 3, New and Radical Imaginaries for an Emerging Civilization, Bunga Raya, Level 1. And Academic Track 4, Futures Thinking and Societal Empowerment, located at Delima, Level 2. Choose the session that aligns with your interests and objectives and make the most of this valuable opportunity. Please proceed to your designated rooms, and the respective moderators and facilitators will guide you through these engaging sessions. We also kindly request your timely return to open space, which is located at the ground floor lobby at 4:30 p.m. for the next session. Thank you and enjoy your chosen session.